We need to address sharpening, and I think what we ought to do is start with resharpening a float, because each sharpening you're going to create slight variations in tooth height, and in resharpening you have to straighten that out. So there's an extra step in resharpening. What I've got is an 1/8 inch edge float clamped in a hand screw. The jaws of that hand screw are parallel to the edge of the vise, so I know it's standing straight up and down. We'll joint this just like you would a hand saw. We'll start by leveling the teeth, and then I'll just draw file across it. I can feel level pretty well on something this wide, and we know that the float is set straight up and down because of its orientation to the bench. So I'll draw file that, and we just want to get to the point that each tooth has got a little bright spot on top. Magnification helps a lot on this, and so I'm going to put on some magnifying glasses here. We need to use machinist layout fluid to make those little flat areas easier to see. We're going to get more coated than the small flats, but we'll remove that pretty quickly with the file and get down to where we just have a bunch of little red lines across the top of the teeth that we need to get rid of. The layout fluid is alcohol-based, dries pretty quickly, so it gives you some working time. If you minimize the amount of the narrow part of the float that's standing out, the noise will be more bearable. We're going to use a 6-inch double extra slim taper file. It's a standard file. You should be able to buy it in your local hardware store. Make sure and get a handle on it. And we're going to control its orientation by aligning it with the gullet of the teeth. Pay close attention to your first tooth. It sets the tone for your entire tool. You want to maintain your cutting geometry just by seating the file in the gullet of the teeth, and follow that. And I'll just drop down here and use that, not change the file orientation, but make sure and get a good, sharp, crisp face on the front of that float to go down to. And I'll do a few of these so that you can see our fine little red line that we're going to end up with. These tend to chatter on the end as you get them away from the clamp. It won't be this bad later. You can't force a file. You have to let it do its own work. We're going to go down to where we just have a fine red line at the end of the tooth, each tooth to remove. And as soon as that's gone, we know that tooth is exactly where we want it. We're getting some really nice teeth on this thing. I want to double check the first tooth and make sure I've got a good edge on it. Now I should be able to go right up this float, filing 1 or 2, 3, 4 teeth at a time, whatever works out for you. Just don't remove more than your little indicator line. And from this point, I think what we'll do is we'll sharpen a side float, do the initial sharpening, which doesn't require joining. There's a little bit more stock to remove because of natural cupping from heat treating. That's where we're going next. I've already filed the front teeth on this float. They go pretty quickly, but I wanted to give you an idea of what happens in the initial sharpening of a side float or a wider float. I've got it in the cradle, supported properly so it's not going to run from me. Remember to let your file do the work. Don't force it into the cut, and things will run smooth and quickly. And we're just going to remove the black oxide finish and expose a fresh cutting edge. It will be nice and sharp on the front of that tooth, and we're also filing the face of the next tooth as we do that. And there we have a tooth that's ready to go to work for us. It's sharp. Continue on to the end. Often you don't have to remove all the oxidation. If you just leave a real slight area in the center of the tooth, that's fine, as long as you get a crisp edge. Very carefully sharpen the first tooth on your floats. It sets the cutting tone for the entire tool.